Welcome to everyone tuning in for our webinar. I'm Candy Evans, founder and publisher of CandysDirt.com. And today we're talking Texas property taxes and how to fight them. Today's webinar is proudly sponsored by Republic Title, the North Texas market leader in title insurance and escrow services. With 12 locations in the DFW area, Republic Title brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise that delivers top-notch service to each and every closing. While they do not and cannot handle your property tax protest, they are an industry authority on the local real estate market and an excellent partner to help you get your deals closed accurately and smoothly. So let's give a big round of thanks to Republic Title for their support, and be sure to connect with them for their expert guidance on your next real estate transaction. And now we're all here today because probably you, just like me, got your property tax notice and may be shell-shocked. I am shell-shocked. We have been geared up to maybe paying less in property taxes thanks to all the tax reform we've heard about coming out of Austin. But as you'll find out today, and as you probably already know right now, that is not the case. So here we are right now with Glenn Goodrich of Property Tax IO, the best property tax fighting agent in Dallas, who's going to tell us what we can do to fight these appraisals. Because guys, it is a fight and we need help, and here it is.
Hi, Candy. Thanks for having us. And actually, I'm going to reveal a big secret to our success right now. I'm going to invite Jim, my father, into the discussion.
It's a legacy. It's fabulous. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Great. Good morning. So glad to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One quick question, Jim. Could you ever imagine that property taxes would get to this point, this high?
No. I never imagined values would do this over the last few years.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. He and I both have the same vantage point. I'm going to tell you that Glenn wrote a column for us a couple of weeks ago detailing how this new property tax reform will impact taxable values in Dallas and put even more of a burden on residential taxpayers from commercial players. It's kind of shifting commercial to the residential. So Glenn, why are these changes leaving residential property owners with basically a huge tax bill?
Well, Candy, we did a podcast together, about a month ago? And in that podcast, we discussed how commercial values, I gave a rough stat. Commercial values are roughly, valued at 75% of market value, and residents are, residential is usually valued around 95% plus of market value. That was before values came out. And then we had values come out since then. And lo and behold, what has happened is commercial valuation shot through the roof. The problem is, and usually the way that taxation works is it's according to value. So as we get more value that comes in, then that's going to bring tax rates down. Okay. So if commercial values go up, that usually means tax rates are going to go down, and that's going to benefit property owners, winners and losers in taxation. Well, a new law got passed last year in the legislative session that kind of went under the radar. It was in Prop 4, and we are aware of the homestead exemption increase for the ISDs that was in Prop 4. That was the big headliner of Prop 4, was increase your homestead exemption from 40,000 to 100,000.
Right.
There were some other there were some other things in Prop 4 though that kind of went under the radar, like this what's called the circuit breaker. And the circuit breaker is like a homestead cap, except it's applied for all property that's valued at under 5 million. So all real estate that's valued at under 5 million. So that would include industrial facilities, retail, office, things like that. So the properties that have never had a cap on it. So when DCAD increased values like crazy this year for commercial, the market value went up here, but then that new circuit breaker said, oh, not so fast. You're going to stop there. And so what that delta is about, I calculated it out. That's about $4.8 billion, billion with a B, in taxable value that's lost. And that translates to about $100 million in tax revenue that could have been gained from commercial properties that will now have to be made up among all taxpayers, which is going to disproportionately impact homeowners, which means higher tax rates for homeowners. That's a thing that nobody's really talking about. We did write an article on it, And that's going to be something that's really frustrating to deal with. Is that in the year where commercial values have been historically undervalued, the year that they decide to pop them, they get this cap protection, and the homeowners still don't see the benefit of of the legislation that way because they're going to get lower. They're going to have higher tax rates because of that.
Right. Now, do you think that this is going to have a big impact on taxpayers? Are they going to get angry? They're going to go to their representatives and say, fix this?
Well, the law. So, Jim, why don't you speak about the cap? You've been dealing with. So, Jim handles my dad. I'll call him my dad. I don't. I always feel weird when I
Okay.
call my dad Jim. So, my dad. Why don't you speak on this, because we've been talking a lot about this and what the cap really means, and legislatively. So, why don't you maybe spend a minute talking about that?
Yeah. Well, it's a very unusual law. The most unusual part about it probably is that it's only a temporary law. It's got a 3-year sunset. So that was a compromise in the legislature to get some sort of cap in on the commercial properties.
Mhm.
And so this law automatically sunsets December 31st, 2026, unless the legislature does something. So um, I've been talking to a lot of our commercial clients, and really just no one is aware of this. Even the commercial brokers are aware of it. The tax consultants that we interact with kind of got flat-footed on this. And so I don't really know if much attention is going to be paid to it this year. We may get some attention paid to it next year after when everyone has gone through a cycle, though.
Interesting.
It's
Was
just
it
odd that it's odd that a commercial that's something that's going to vastly benefit commercial is directly tied to residential now in the form of higher tax rates. That's why I thought it was important to bring up, and why I think that the listeners here should be aware. There's this law that is benefiting commercial properties for the most part. I mean, this is really a Dallas County issue. We don't really see it much in Collin or Denton, and we haven't seen it in Tarrant County. Although this could definitely happen in Tarrant County in the future, but it's definitely impacting Dallas. I mean, that's a huge it's gonna cause higher tax rates for homeowners in Dallas. So
right. Now, why is it only impacting maybe Dallas County and Tarrant County?
Jim or my dad, you might
Yeah.
you might
Yeah.
chime in on this more, but I think it's because Dallas is really commercial heavy, and they also tend to value every other year, and they've also just been historically low in Dallas. And then, I mean, what else do you have to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's all that's true. Just to give you a number on it, we produced some data yesterday with Glenn's help, and the median value increase in industrial properties in Dallas, what was it, Glenn? About 55%, I think. It was over 50%. So
Right.
the commercial values can be very volatile, not because the market changes so quickly. It's just that they don't reappraise every single year, whereas in residential, they tend to do that. And we did just get our Tarrant County value notices yesterday. And in fact, there's going to be some properties under the circuit breaker there as well. And so a lot of it is due to timing, and some of it is due to just it's harder to get commercial values right. We won't get into that for all those reasons, but that's part of it.
Interesting. But the whole point is that we, the property owners of single family homes, residential property owners, are going to have to pick up the tab for this. We're going to have to cover.
Yeah, especially in Dallas County, right? And it could happen elsewhere. And so I think that's why the homeowners need to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So back to the warehouses, if the average warehouse went up, so let's just say 50%, but it's capped at 20%, that means there's 30% of the value is not being taxed, no tax collected on those. And 30% of, a $5 million warehouse is a big number. And you put the taxes to that at a tax rate of roughly 2%. That's a lot of taxes that are not collected that somebody else has to pay.
Right. And that somebody is us.
Right.
Unfortunately.
We're so lucky. I'm really concerned. I'm starting to hear mumblings of people saying, these property taxes that there ain't no Texas dream, guys, because the property taxes are such a chunk. And looking to other states, I mean, already we've heard of companies, looking at Tennessee, Nashville, Vegas, other places, because of the property taxes. So what are you guys hearing from the legislators? Do they know this? Are they aware of this?
They're definitely aware of it. I mean, it was a big split between even the Republican Party in Texas. You have the Senate that's looking at the tax rates, and I think that's going to be more the future of how they approach this is looking at tax rates. And so, actually, tax rates were reduced last year, and I think they'll continue on with that. So it's not all bad news. We have a lot of tax rate compression that will continue, and that'll benefit all property owners, including residential. So be on the lookout for that. Don't think the cap will be this new circuit breaker cap is not going to be touched for 3 years. But I think that there's still things they can do on tax rates. But Candy, do you think this would be a good time to show that map that I did?
Oh my gosh, I was just gonna, thank you for saying that, because I was just gonna say, why did taxes go up so much this year? And actually, while you're answering that question, maybe we could take a look at that. We have an amazing, this is amazing. If you look on this map, I'm going to turn it over to Glenn in a minute, but the dark red is where the maroon color is where the highest increase was in property taxes. And I've talked with you about this before, but I want to tell our audience, tell us why this year we had this huge jump.
Right. So this is segmented by zip code, and I have the 5 counties that kind of make up our North Texas market: Tarrant, Dallas, Rockwall, Collin, and Denton County. And I mean, obviously, what sticks out on that is where all the red is in Dallas County. I think a reason for that is because Dallas had a unique issue last year when they were recovering from the hack that they had, and they kind of what's called rolled values for most of Dallas County. I know that last year they hit Highland Park pretty hard, and they hit Highland Park again this year. You can tell if you're looking on the map. You can kind of see where Highland Park is and how it got hit again. A lot of South Dallas got hit again. It was hit last year, got hit again, and then they just hit the rest of Dallas County. The rest of Dallas County was relatively unvalued last year, and so they're making up a lot of market value that they missed last year because they were recovering from the hack. And so that's why you just see Dallas just pop big time. Dallas traditionally kind of goes aggressive one year and then sits back one year, whereas you see Collin County and Denton County and Tarrant County will revalue every year. Dallas is kind of different in that way, and that's why a lot of people got sticker shock, was because last year their value didn't do anything, and now it's not uncommon to see 25% increases in value in Dallas County right now.
Unbelievable. Well, it's really, I was really shocked by seeing how far south that super duper increase went. And so that hacking really cost us money, and it cost us this kind of surprise attack on our taxes too.
Can I show? Let me show another part of that map though that I think people would be interested in, real quick. So this is the market value percent change, and if you're in Collin County or Denton County or in Tarrant County looking at this, you might say, yeah, we got by relatively unfazed this year. But now there's another value that really is the more important value, and that's the cap value. So the cap value is what your and I'll go into what the cap value is in a little bit, but that is the value that drives your tax bill. And so you see that everybody's cap values increased way more than their market values did. That's because your cap value will automatically increase until it meets the market value. So we've had previous years, especially in Collin and Denton County, where you saw, I mean, some of them were like 40% increases in value. And so last year the cap got cut off here. And this year, even though values relatively stayed the same or maybe slightly increased a little bit, the cap is going to automatically increase that 10% every year until it meets that market value. So everybody's tax bill is still going to go up pretty significantly all around the area, even if your value didn't change, or we even saw parts of Denton County that saw a slight decrease in market value, but the cap value is so low relative to the market value from previous years that it's almost everybody is maxing out at that 10% increase this year again. So everybody's tax bill is still going to be increasing pretty significantly this year. And if you're in Dallas County, you're not only looking at higher values, but going back to how we started off, you're going to see higher tax rates than you should have also. So I think if you're in Dallas County, it's especially concerning year. And I wish to encourage everybody to protest, hire a company to do it yourself, but begin the process of clawing back some of that value that was aggressively added on this year. You're
Excellent.
all,
Going to ask you to go, let's go into that. Is it worth protesting your taxes, especially if you have the large cap? And is it worth protesting it? So few people do it.
right, right. So this might be a good question for my dad. You know, you've been in the business a lot longer than I have. What are we experiencing now in the market versus historically, and what has the past couple of years been like comparatively?
Well, if you look at what's happened post-pandemic, I've called that a once in a 100-year market. We've never seen a market like that, and we probably never will see it again. And you really should never compare any real estate market with what happened in 21 and early part of 2022. And so, you know, that has really people tend to look at the value side of the tax bill and not so much at the tax rates. But we are finally seeing people look at, hey, there's two parts of this equation. Your taxes are your value times your rate. And so people are starting to look at the rate a little bit more now too. And rates have come down quite a bit, not enough to offset the higher taxes with the values. But when your tax value goes up, that really does pique an interest in protesting your taxes. And I think hopefully with webinars like this, we're getting the word out. And Candy, you're playing a good part of this because a lot of people in the real estate community read your blog. And so I know Republic Title is doing a lot of seminars too, and we've done seminars with them as well, webinars.
Yeah.
I think what's important to understand is the actual what is the value that you're protesting. Because we run a chat on a web chat on our website, and this is by far the biggest topic that we get asked about. And so I'm going to share a slide real quick to kind of break this down. So understanding the value, and I saw somebody in the question and answer kind of call me out on the map that I had just shown about the cap value, and I think they're exactly right. So I'm going to read what they said, and I'll tie it into this slide. It was Lori that said this to me. She said that cap value only applies to homestead property. Investment properties went through the roof last year. My rental home in Collin County went up nearly 40% in 1 year. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the cap value is for a homestead only. So understanding your value, the market value, that's the only value you can protest. So when you file a protest of value with the appraisal district, you can only protest the market value of the property. Now the cap value, I call it the cap value. The reason why I call it the cap value is because depending on which county you're in, they call it something different. So if you're in Collin County, the cap value is called the assessed value. The comptroller's office will call it the homestead limit. Dallas County calls it the homestead cap. Tarrant County calls it the appraised value, which is confusing because in Collin County and in Denton County, the appraised value is actually the market value in a lot of cases. And in Denton County and Collin County, the cap value is called the assessed value. So this is a very big point of confusion for people. I wish we had more state level control over at least just the nomenclature that we use so that we can all get on the same page with that. Now, the biggest misconception is, this speaks to the question that you asked, is it worth protesting with such a large cap or with such a large difference? So you go up by 25% in market value, but your homestead limit or your cap will kick in at that 10%. Okay. So you only save money on your tax bill when you reduce the cap value. So how do you reduce the cap value if you have a 25% increase in value and it's limited at 10%? Well, that means you have to get a more than 15% decrease in your market value to start saving money. So when you lower the market value below the cap value, that lowers the cap value automatically. If you lower the market value above the cap value, so in other words, if I got a 25% increase and my cap value kicked in at 10% and I get a 5% decrease on my market value, I'm still 10% different between my new lowered market value and my existing cap value. That's not going to lower the cap value. And in order to save money in a protest, you have to lower the cap value. So I'm going to I'm going to stop sharing this and kind of talk about that, and maybe we can have some people chime in on that. This year, especially in Dallas, is a longer term play. If you're going, you need to. Most people that have a large cap, like my property, I live in East Dallas. I have my value has increased 26%. There's no way I'm going to get that value low enough to save money this year. But I've done this in years past, where I have taken action this year, and I've gotten a cut. Maybe I get an 8% cut in my value. And that's going to set me up for future years, set the bar lower for future years, because we know that Dallas County tends to take a year, hit hard one year, take a year off. So that means a cut that you get this year will often remain in place for the next year. That's not so much true in counties like Collin County or Denton County, or maybe even Tarrant County, but although I do see Tarrant kind of take some years off. But if you're in Dallas County, especially this year, and you were hit hard and you're wondering, how can I, is it even worth it to protest? It is for a longer term approach. And I will get into this later about fee structures with a company when you want to hire a company. When I start talking about more specifics of nut and bolts of a protest and how you should actually go about protesting your value this year. But I do think in Dallas County, especially, it's worth for a longer term play to get involved and protest. And in Collin County, you're starting to see, because the value increases were not so great in the market value, the caps are really creeping up a lot closer to the market value. So there's actually chances to save money this year as it wasn't in years past. So I think everywhere should really be engaged in a protest and shouldn't be discouraged by the caps. In Dallas, you just have to adjust your expectation that it's probably going to be more of a longer term play.
Glenn, let's get back to Lori for just a minute out in Wiley. Hi, Lori. You mentioned your property went up 40%, your rental property. Remember that the circuit breaker, let's don't forget about that. That has a 20% cap. So it's not as good as a 10%, but it's got a 20% cap. And that does apply to rental property. Second home, it's not just for commercial.
I think she was saying that her value went up last year, 40%. That's right. The circuit breaker was in place. But yeah, it goes up. It'll be limited at 20% from this point forward. So, yeah.
But
go ahead, Candy.
I mean, I'm in the same, Lori, I'm in the same boat. I have a rental property, and yesterday I had to tell my tenant that I've got to raise rent because I've got to cover the taxes, which is why I get so upset when our government doesn't realize that one of the biggest problems with affordable housing is property taxes. Because if you have rental property, you're going to have to raise the rent to cover those taxes.
Do you think now would be a good time to get into pivoting more? I think we've done a really good job of describing the problem and how people should take action. I think a lot of people have tuned in for specifics about how to fixing the problem, how to protest the value. And I have no problem opening up my playbook to everybody, and I'm going to do that. I think now's a good time to get into that, Candy.
I think it's a good time. I'm looking at the questions, and I think this might even answer some of them. And also, I want to tell you all that if you signed up for this webinar, we will have it on tape and we will send it to you. And there's a good chance that we may reproduce it on Candy's Dirt at some point too, if we need to. So we will help you in that regard. But I mean, thank you so much. But yeah, Glenn, open your playbook up. What do you do? How do you file a tax protest successfully?
Well, I'm going to start here, and this is a slide. And this is the last of my slides. But this slide is really important because the thing you have to, in order to file a successful protest, you have to understand where they got their data from and the time frame of when it is. So I've got this. Let me see if I can actually get a pointer working on this. No, well, that's not going to work. Okay, there's a pointer. This line right here is the typical beginning of the sales data collection. So this starts in January of 2023 and it goes to January of 2024. And these light bars right here that are going vertical, the bars are that's the sales volume broken down per month. And this darker bar right here, or this darker line right here, is the median sale price per month. And so what I'm trying to communicate here is, here's when they begin to collect sales data, and here's when they end collection of sales data. 60% of the sales data that they collect, the sales volume, occurs right at the peak of the market. And so your notice of appraised value will often reflect, I think this automatically says there's probably wiggle room in your notice of appraised value because they're collecting a lot of their sales at the peak of the market. And there's the ability to show, hey, when I file a protest, we're not in mass appraisal mode anymore. We're looking at specific comps for my property. So we're not letting a computer value my property anymore, looking at aggregate information like price per square foot changes in a neighborhood. We're saying, I want to use this property that recently sold down the street to compare against my property now. So let's say that the appraisal district's noticing you through all of this data, really, but it's going to be heavily weighted at the peak of the market. You're now filing a protest. Start collecting sales closer to this time frame. The date of valuation is going to be January 1st, this green line right here. So by law, we have to value the property as of January 1st of every year. So try to weight your sales collection towards the end of the year, because those are going to be the lower sales, and that's just by the book. That's by the law, because that's the closest to January 1st. If you're in a protest and the appraisal district is using comps that are in May, June, and July from 2023, I would say that's at the peak of the market. Can we time adjust those down a little bit? Can we offer an 8% adjustment? So if a property sold for 400,000, can we adjust it down a little bit to consider that it sold at the peak of the market because it was in June, and now we're valuing it in January 1st, and values are lower around January than they are at the peak of the market in the summer months. I mean, most of the people on this webinar are realtors or real estate professionals, and they very much understand the seasonality of real estate and when there's a peak market. So the way that we do that in our business, so my playbook, is we do graphs just like this. This is a graph that shows all of basically the DFW. So don't take this as the gospel for how the appraisal district is going to view it, or the data that's going to be specific to your market. What we do is we actually take more specific information relative to the properties that we're valuing. So I might break this down more by ISD if I'm you. So if I'm a realtor and I'm trying to help one of my clients out, try to get some sales data like this and do graphs or something like that that shows, hey, we're in McKinney ISD or something like that. Let's get sales from the ISD, chart it like this. You can get that stuff from Nitris, and show the trend of how values have gone down from the peak of the market. If you're in East Dallas, try to do a geographic, boundary for East Dallas. If you're in Highland Park, obviously do HPISD, things like that show a value trend, and that'll get you more favor of at least punching a hole in using a sale that happened at the peak of the market and getting it knocked down a little bit, because that's an adjustment that the appraisal districts are not going to do. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's an uphill battle. Even we as trained professionals don't always get that result that we want, but we do get it quite a bit of time. So I think it's worth a try to try it that way.
Let me kind of recap that, and then I'll let you hop in, Jim. Are you saying that they may appraise, DCAD may look at appraisals at different times of the year, and so we're trying to get it at a lower value time? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're collecting. Sorry, they're collecting data from about April typically to about January 31st. So
Okay.
all of this right here is when they're collecting their data, and they have to value by law at January 1st of every year. So the argument I'm trying to say is, if you're pulling in sales from this time period to try to value over here where this green line is, that's going to be, look at where the green line intersects value right there, and look at where the peak of the market is. That's about an 8% drop in value to where we're January 1st date of valuation. So we need to time adjust. The same house that would sell in June would sell for less in January, just because of the seasonality of real estate. And that's all we're trying to say is, yes, this property sold for this amount in June, but if you had listed it for sale in January of 2024, it would have sold for less. So we need to time adjust that down, because what we're doing with the appraisal district is, on January 1st, we're saying a hypothetical buyer would pay this amount for my property on January 1st. And if you're a realtor, you're saying, I don't want you to list your property for sale on January 1st. I want you to list it for sale in June or May. And so we need to account for the fact that we are valuing the property by law for property tax purposes at the absolute low point of the market.
Glenn, there's two questions that have kind of come in, and you just covered one of them pretty well. But I just want to emphasize that the date of value for your tax protest is January the 1st, 2024. It's not in June when you're in there in the ARB. So this is kind of a paradigm shift for realtors. They're saying, well, our comps need to be in the last 6 months. So here I am in the ARB in June. I need to look from January to June for comps, and that's not true. As Glenn just explained on that graph, that your comps come, maybe a month after January 1st to maybe 6 or 8 months before. And that decreasing line that Glenn had that we all saw there with values, yeah, some of that's seasonal, but some of it this year is interest rates. Interest rates started trending up and they peaked in October. Interest rates right now, at least, they are a factor in what houses will sell for. That affects multiple offers, all that sort of thing. And so we thought we were going to get a break back in December, January when rates dropped a little bit, but with that inflation data that came out, the mantra now is higher for longer with interest rates. So we're going to have to wait.
Yes.
I
And a lot of folks have asked in the questions, where can we get more information on this? Well, it's CandysDirt.com. That's our website that started as a blog, of course, but where we write about real estate, everything real estate, and we write about taxes with all this wonderful information from Glenn. We've been doing this now for about 3 months, I believe. We kind of anticipated that this would happen. So that's where you can find more information. I believe,
and I will be giving my PowerPoint exclusively to you guys. So I'm sure we'll do a follow-up post where we have some of the charts and the graphs and all that, and a link to the video probably where you can access all the information through your website.
Go ahead, Candy.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, there's one other misconception out there that I want to address, and somebody asked this in the chat. The question was something like, I thought that our values should be about 80% of what they would actually sell for. And that is a misconception that's been out there for years. A lot of times your tax value is on the low side of what it would sell for, but by law, the appraisal district has to value your property at what it would sell for. And so as of January the 1st. So
what they interpret it would sell for, and that's what we're disputing when we file a protest is and part of that goes back to the data collection and all that we were talking about. We talk a lot about comps. A really legitimate angle to go is condition, where you're saying, hey, and when you're arguing condition, I mean, you're showing like photos that show like a kitchen that's like 25 years old that hasn't been updated, or you're showing a new mold issue that you discovered that wasn't fixed. And again, January 1st is a very important date when you're arguing about condition. The issue that you're discussing has to have impacted the value on January 1st of the tax year. So in this case, it has to have impacted the value on January 1st of 2024. I see a lot of people make mistakes with this when they file their protest because, in Texas, we have hail that happens in the spring, and people have damaged roofs because of that. And so maybe if we had a hailstorm, especially if you're up in Denton or Conn County in March, of 2024, well, March of 2024 is after the date of valuation, January 1st, 2024. So a lot of people try to take that information in there and say, oh, I've got this roof damage, and the appraisal district's going to say, we can't consider that because that happened after January 1st of 2024, and a hypothetical buyer on January 1st of 2024 wouldn't have had a crystal ball and said, oh, there's going to be a hailstorm and I want to discount my price because of that. So that's a rule that applies. Now, if you fix an issue before January 1st of 2024, we have a lot of people that had maybe a water damage or something like that from a frozen pipe in the winter, and they fixed it before January 1st of 2024. So let's say you had a pipe that burst in early December, and that caused a lot of water damage with your flooring, all the walls, and all that stuff. And if you have it fixed before January 1st of 2024, then that's going to be, they won't consider that. The kinds of documentation that you need to show that the issue existed on January 1st of 2024 is a document that you can show, hey, this issue existed prior to January 1st of 2024, and then maybe a document or photos that show it existed after January 1st of 2024 as well. So if you had a freeze that happened in the middle of December or at the end of December, and all your pipes burst, causing a bunch of water damage, and you weren't able to fix it until after January 1st of 2024, that's an ideal scenario to take in for a condition issue. So you would document that with like a date of loss from an insurance, and then subsequent invoices from somebody who fixed it, where they could show the dates for the date of loss was prior to January 1st, and the invoices were after January 1st. Other issues like a foundation, like you get a bid to fix the foundation, and some third party says it's going to cost you, $20,000 to fix your foundation, and you can say I haven't fixed that issue yet. Those documents need to be dated within the past year. So we do have a lot of people on my website, and on my website, propertytax.io, we do allow for people to upload photos and documents and everything. So I see the gambit of good and bad condition information. So I'm speaking pretty confidently with what I think a lot of typical people try to go the route with on condition. And I do see some people that have used documents that are 3 years old, like a foundation bid they got from 3 years ago. The appraisal district will just immediately throw that out. It has to be a document that's dated, I would say, at least after January 1st of 2023, and ideally closer to being more recent than that. The closer to January 1st of 2024, in this case, the better for a documentation on that. So things to avoid with condition issues, just kind of normal wear and tear on the property. I see a lot of people that upload tons and tons of information, and it's like, $500 here, $250 here, and they're just working it up. And when you sum it all up, it equals $5,000 or something like that. But a lot of those items are just normal wear and tear issues, and the appraisal district isn't really going to pay attention to that. And I'm not, I'm speaking with that through doing this thousands of times and getting the feedback thousands of times from the appraisal district. That kind of stuff doesn't move the needle with valuation. So keep it to larger ticket items, things that are beyond normal wear and tear, things that you can document. You can't just go in there and say, I've got these issues. You have to be able to show photos and documented evidence that issue actually exists.
Graham, could you talk a little bit about in the ARB, if you're going to do this yourself, how long do you have? And
right.
What is, to me, I've always said probably the most important word to remember is the term concise. And individuals especially have a very difficult time with that. Why is that such an important word to remember when you're in front of that ARB?
Well, you're limited with 5 minutes to present your information at the appraisal review board. And when you've done it as long as I have, and you do it, we really do it in a matter of a couple of minutes. And that's actually a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder to give an effective presentation in 2 minutes than it is to kind of bounce all over the place in 10 minutes. When you're not straight and to the point, keep in mind, these people are here all day, every day, hearing a lot of the same thing over and over again. And I think it becomes very boring and offensive to them when you're not prepared for the hearing. Where I notice the biggest moves in value are people that have done their homework. That kind of perks them up. They're like, okay, this person is prepared and they're not going to waste my time. We have to get, because in their mind, they're sitting there saying, we've got to get through dozens of these today. We got to get through 50 hearings today. And we want to get these people in and out as soon as possible, because if we can get 60 hearings today, that's even better. So if you're in there taking 10 minutes on something and you're not prepared, then I think that's to your detriment. So it's much harder to be concise, and it's much harder to get everything you need to say in 2 minutes than it is to not be prepared and just kind of wing it and waste their time, and your results will reflect that. So
people, don't be afraid to hire someone like you to do it, because actually, don't you split the savings with the homeowner?
Yeah, so on we only charge that's a good question, because if one of the routes to go with this, and I think, and this is the route most people actually go with this, is hiring a firm to do it, like my firm, Property Tax IO, to do it. And there's other good firms to use as well. But you asked the question about how we charge, and that's a very relevant question about how to hire a firm to do that, how we handle that. We charge a percentage of the savings. So if we don't save the client any money, we don't bill for that. The percentage of savings for most properties that we handle is 35% of the savings. And then in addition to that, we offer what are called capped or maximum fees. So depending on the value of the property, you'll never pay more than that amount. And there's you could also pay much less than that amount if 35% of the savings equates to less than that. You can go to our website, propertytax.io, and click on the pricing tab at the top. And there's very clear and transparent pricing on how we charge. Now, if you're looking at other firms and shopping around, here's my advice, especially if you're in Dallas County or if you're in a county where we've talked about the cap value a lot earlier, that homestead limit. If you have a large homestead limit and you're right here where your market value is up here and your homestead limit is kicking you in right there, anything that you're charged for a reduction from here, this market value, down to this market value that's still above the cap value, you're not saving money on that. We don't charge for reductions in that case. We only charge if we actually take this market value here, lower it below that cap value to make that cap value meet. We only charge in that case. There's other firms that charge you for a reduction here to here where they haven't lowered your cap value at all. They'll still charge you for that, even though you haven't saved any money. I think the worst case scenario is to hire a firm that offers a flat upfront fee. I would just avoid those kinds of firms altogether because their job is to sign you up. And I mean, I actually got a letter in the mail yesterday that I was maybe the most offended I have ever been by a competitor and I have a large homestead cap. I mean, it's like $120,000 difference between my market value and my cap value. And I represent myself. I've worked it every year. This letter said that they would charge an upfront flat fee of $249 that I would pay them right now, and they would protest the value, and they estimate that I could save $2,100 in savings. That's impossible, and that is so egregious. Somebody like me that knows better, that's extremely offensive. Do not engage a company like that. So that I would avoid flat fee companies.
We'll do a story on that.
Stick to companies that charge an actual percentage of the savings and make sure that is based off of a reduction in that cap value, because that's what's going to benefit you, the homeowner, the most. So if you're going to hire a company, the fee and how they structure their fee, I think also speaks a lot about how open and transparent and trustworthy they are as a company.
Right. Oh, that's very true. This is a lot of information, and I mean, I have to Jim and Glenn know I asked them to repeat many times. I'm trying to, take it all in, but rest assured, this topic will be covered extensively on CandysDirt.com. This is just what we're about. We're about homes. We're about buying homes. We're also about helping you save money on property taxes. Did we cover the new homestead audit?
No, not quite yet. So that's a new issue that came in from Prop 4 that was passed last year, where we briefly talked about that earlier. That's the same proposition last year that we voted on to increase the homestead exemption. So when we did that, the way that we were able to pay for the increased homestead exemption and lower tax rates for the ISD is because the state had a huge surplus and they were subsidizing at the local level. Well, with that came more state control. And the state said, we will subsidize the local ISDs with lower tax rates and higher homestead exemptions, but we require now that there has to be an audit of the homestead exemptions that are on file every 5 years. And what that can result in is your homestead exemption being removed if they don't have all the documentation in place. So if they don't have a scanned driver's license, or if you've changed your driver's license since you filed your homestead exemption and it doesn't match, something doesn't match anymore with what they had on file, that'll trigger a letter that's being sent to you by certified mail from the appraisal district that says you have 30 days to respond to this. Otherwise, we're going to pull your homestead exemption. And I've seen that happen in some cases already this year. So that is something new. Usually we're used to filing the homestead exemption and it's in place and it doesn't get changed unless we have some sort of deed change on our property or we sell the property or something like that. But that's something new, that your actual homestead exemption can be removed if all the documentation doesn't match up with the appraisal district's records. They will prompt you, hey, we need you to update some documentation for us within 30 days. Otherwise, we're going to yank the homestead exemption. The issue is people aren't used to seeing that letter. The letter that's sent out is very confusing. It references specific sections of the tax code, and it's really technical. So a lot of people, I think, get the letter and they just don't even know what to do with it. They don't even really know what it is, and they kind of ignore it. and then it becomes where their exemption's removed. And once your exemption's removed, it's kind of kicked into a different process with the appraisal districts, and it's kind of harder to get it back on. So try to avoid that headache by at least being aware. If I get this letter from the appraisal district that says, we need you to update some documentation regarding your homestead exemption, just know that's going to be a normal part of the process from this point forward because of the state subsidizing at our local level. They required now that they audit the homestead exemptions on file.
They want to make sure that that is really your home, that you're living. They don't want, because there are, I hate to say it, but there are some people who, claim homestead and they don't live in the house, correct?
Yeah, the
Yes.
whole point was to eliminate fraud.
And
Go ahead.
and let me just jump in here on that, Candy. If they catch you with that, it's not like they just send you a bill for what you should have paid. There's penalties and interest tacked on top of that as well. So, Glenn, I've got about 3 questions that I want to fire at you real quick, if that's okay. One of them, Monica said that she lost her homestead exemption and wants to get it back. It's not known and it's not really publicized very well. What is the deadline to file or even refile for a homestead exemption that you should have gotten in the past?
Well, the publicized deadline is April 30th. So we just passed that deadline. And that's what we recommend is if file before April 30th. The reason why that's the publicized deadline is because the exemptions have to work through the system. They have to be processed, and that can take months to process. So keep in mind, they're going to be sending out tax bills later this year in October. So they say April 30th, have it in by April 30th. That's going to ensure that the tax bill that's mailed out to you in October is going to reflect that homestead exemption. Now, there's a hidden deadline, and that is actually 2 years after the delinquency date, that the year that you qualified for the homestead exemption. So that's let me unpack that. Let's say that you qualify for the homestead exemption in 2024, okay? But you haven't filed. So you missed the April 30th deadline, okay? Because we're May 2nd now. So your taxes become delinquent. Candy, do you know this? Do you know this answer? If we're in 2024, when are your taxes actually due for your 2024 taxes? Do you know that?
They're due January 31st of 2025.
Yay, Candy. Yeah, that's right. Candy got it right. So your taxes are actually due January 31st of 2025 if we're looking at your 2024 tax bill. So 2 years after the delinquency date would actually be January 31st of 2027. Okay? So you actually have until January 31st of 2027 to go back. Now that would result in a huge refund for you. And that would be, I don't recommend that people wait that long. Obviously, file your homestead exemption as soon as you qualify for it. However, if you're in a circumstance where you weren't even aware of the homestead exemption, which you wouldn't be surprised at how many people I have helped that don't know that there's actually, I moved in from California, I didn't even know about a homestead exemption. So you can actually go 2 years past the delinquency date. Now, Candy, while I'm on this, I feel like I need to make a consumer warning while I'm talking about homestead exemptions. There is another company out there right now that is actually now has become the largest company in the state of Texas. And I normally do not like to call out companies by name. And you saw me talk earlier about a flat fee company, and I did not call that company out by name. But this is such an egregious thing that they're doing that I do feel like I have to call them out by name. The company is called Ownwell, okay? And they are actually charging 25% of the savings for exemptions to file. So on my website at Property Tax IO, and we have a lot of people that chat in all the time. Hey, I moved into my property a few years ago, and I need to file the homestead exemption. What can I do? We help them with that. It's very easy to file a homestead exemption. You fill out a form, and the appraisal districts want to grant you the homestead exemption. It's not like it's a big contentious thing. What Ownwell does is they say, we'll file for you for free. We'll file this homestead exemption for you for free. And if it's granted, we will collect 25% of the savings. So go back to the scenario of people that file 2 years late, okay? That's going to involve a massive refund for them, especially in years where homestead caps, because when you file a late homestead exemption, that affords you the homestead caps that kick in from the previous year, as well as the exemption amount that you should have paid. So, I mean, I've seen, and we've done work where we've helped people like in underserved areas like in South Dallas and in West Dallas, where we help them file their exemptions for free. And that has resulted in $5,000 refunds, $9,000 refunds for certain people. Oh, this company, Ownwell, would charge 25% of that. And no other company does this. That's a big no-no in our industry to charge this way. And so that's why I feel like I have to kind of break my protocol and call a company out by its name, because it is so egregious to charge. It's so unethical to do that. And especially the way that they mislead you by saying the filing is free. However, if it's granted, which in my mind, filing almost is an automatic grant of the homestead exemption. So sorry I went off on that little tangent, but I felt the need to do a consumer warning on that, especially since a lot of the audience is realtors who are helping buyers that are going to be in the same problem where they file late or they're getting a homestead exemption. I would not hire a company that's going to charge a percentage of the savings for a very easy document to submit to an appraisal district.
And I'm going to kind of interject here that this is a great way for agents to show their buyers and their customers how valuable they really are, because they are. I mean, they're terrifically valuable. And, if you have someone who's just moved here from California or Illinois or something, tell them about the homestead. Go sit down with them and help them, file that homestead exemption, because they often don't know about it. And this is another way, of course, for you to show your value and provide some intelligentsia for them that they can't get anywhere else. So I think that's a really important thing to talk about.
Yeah, and while we're on that point, we have a partner program for all the realtors and real estate professionals that you can go to our website, propertytax.io/partner. And that's the approach we take with this. We want to engage you all. I second everything that Candy said. You guys are a great resource for your clients. And we try to be an extension of that service. And our job is to make you look good by solving the property tax problem with our domain expertise in this particular field. But a lot of people rely on real estate professionals about, hey, my property taxes went up. What can I do? All this and that. Partner with us. And we value customer service extensively. I mean, that is the number one thing that we value. And we understand that when you're handing somebody over to us, that reflects on you. And we're very well aware of what partnership means with that.
So Glenn, I have two more quick questions because we're getting close to the end here. One of them, it deals with the election coming up in a couple of days. But before we get to that, Kathy chats in, how do we get sales information that the county is going to use against us? So could you talk about getting the appraisal district's playbook, as I've heard you call it, the 14-day evidence request?
Right. Yeah. So this goes back, and so I don't necessarily have to do this as an agent, because it's like I'm a black belt in judo. Like I've been doing this for a long time. I can kind of think on my feet. I'm trained to do that. But if you're the homeowner, and I empathize with this. When I first started out, it was much harder. Now that I've done this for thousands and thousands of times, I can do it like the back of my hand. But if you're not as experienced as we are, which most people are not, here's what I would do. Make a 14-day evidence request to the appraisal district. And this is what I wish that I was doing more when I first started out. What that does is it makes the appraisal district show you their playbook. They say, hey, prior to the hearing, we have to give you all the evidence that we're going to use to defend our value at the hearing. And that'll give you, and usually they give that to you about 5. So you have to make that 14 days prior to your hearing. And usually they deliver that to you a few days, maybe 5 days before your hearing via email or something like that. And what that'll do is that'll give you a couple of days to look at their evidence and say, well, they're using this comp and this comp to value my property. Maybe I go onto a website or I contact my realtor and I say, can I get some photos of these sales? And then what I would do is draw comparisons of your interior versus the interior of those sales. Or you can say, this property sold way high and you're not even using this property that sold next door to me. So I would rather use this sale than that sale. So you're going to go in there knowing everything, and they cannot modify their evidence once they send that to you. So even if they learned something that could hurt your case after the fact, they cannot introduce that in the hearing. So you will know exactly what they're going to present, and they cannot deviate from that. And if they try to deviate from that, you can say, no, I made a 14-day evidence request, and this is everything you gave me. This was not included in that evidence that you gave me, so it can't be used in this hearing. So I would highly recommend you make that 14-day evidence request so that you can gain some confidence prior to going into the hearing, and you can know exactly what's going to be presented, and you're not just going to be trying to think on the spot with something for the first time and put your thoughts together.
So the next question I had was, we have an election coming up in a couple of days, and there's something brand new on a ballot that none of us have experienced before. It's getting almost zero press. And that is the elected positions to the Appraisal District Board of Directors, not the ARB, but the Appraisal District Board of Directors. So Ed chatted in that he went to the ARB, had some good evidence, and they just laughed him out of the room. And Dallas,
Right.
I will tell you that we have always had a problem with the ARB members in the residential cases ever since I've been doing this. I've been doing it 30 years. This is one thing, these new elected positions to the Appraisal District Board of Directors have a lot of power on who's on that ARB. Can you talk about that a little bit? And then if Candy, if you want me to name the candidates, I will, and you may want to weigh on this as well.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Glenn.
So the newly elected position, it's a nonpartisan position, so it's not going to be like somebody's running as Democrat or Republican. And the way that you used to get onto the Appraisal Review Board, the ARB, was you had to go through a district judge to get appointed onto the Appraisal Review Board. And this new law that was under Prop 4 that we've talked about a few times that was passed last year, it includes this newly elected position to the Appraisal District Board. Now, what the Appraisal District Board does is they have two main responsibilities historically. Now they have an additional responsibility, but they oversee the budget of the appraisal district, and they can hire and fire the chief appraiser of the appraisal district. Now they have a new responsibility, which is now they have to hire the members of the Appraisal Review Board. So no longer is a district judge going to do that. It's going to be done by the Appraisal District Board of Directors. And the Appraisal District Board of Directors is made up of bureaucrats. They're not elected. They're appointed by elected officials. So like the mayor would appoint somebody to the board of board of directors, or the school district would. Now there's going to be two other positions that you can get onto the board of directors that are going to be elected. And so that's going to be May 4th is going to be the election for that. And those two people that are going to be elected now, the reason why they wanted the populace, the people, to have more control over the quality of the ARB. And these are going to be the two people that spearhead that. So these are going to be the two people that that are going to communicate with the public. They're going to have the bullhorn, be accountable to you. If you don't like the job they're doing, they're going to get thrown out of the office, just like how any other elected position would. They have a superpower with the other appraisal review board or the other board members, in that they can veto anybody that going onto the board. So they're onto the appraisal review board. So they're very powerful in the sense that they have a lot of control over who gets on to the appraisal review board. And so this will be a more important position going forward as we know more about it and it's more aware. But if you want to improve the quality of the appraisal review board, we need to start paying more attention to these elections of who is going to be the two elected members to the board now.
Yeah, we'll try to
So-
get a.
There's actually three, Glenn.
There's three. There's
There's
one
actually
three, yeah. Three, but
opposed too.
No,
Yeah,
there's three. Two of them are running unopposed.
yeah, I think that's why I said two. Was two of them running?
Two of them are running unopposed, and then there's two that are running against each other for place one.
Before we head out, I wanted to make sure that we cover the deadline to file a protest. For the vast majority of homeowners, the deadline is going to be May 15th to file. So we got a couple of weeks left. And that's for Dallas, Collin, Denton, and Rockwall. Now, Tarrant County, because of the hack that they had a few issues, and they've extended their deadline to file to May 24th. So if you're in Tarrant County, you have a little bit more time than you're used to having. If you received your notice after, so for most people, we got our notices in the mail April 15th. This doesn't apply to Tarrant County, but if you're in Dallas, Collin, Denton, or Rockwall, and you got your notice after April 15th, the appraisal district mailed you late, you have 30 days until after the appraisal district mailed you that notice. So that'll impact a handful of people, but for most people, it's going to be May 15th. And then if you're in Tarrant County, May 24th. Don't wait till the last minute to file a protest. Do it now if you haven't already. Hire a company. You can hire my company, Property Tax IO, or you can shop around, avoid the flat fee companies. And you can hire somebody to do that for you. But do that now before waiting till the last minute. And then I just also wanted to throw up our QR code You can follow us on social media. We put out tons of content, videos where we talk about all kinds of property tax issues. And so if you are not already following us on social media, go ahead and follow us there, and you'll get great content from us throughout the year.
There's a couple of good questions, but David Bush said, I thought DCAD will look at comps 18 months back.
They will. I mean, it depends on what's available, really.
The problem is that's going to be a pretty high sales. this
Yeah.
year.
If they pull that on you, I mean, my immediate response is, if it helps you, great. If it doesn't help you, then fight that by saying, well, we're looking at, that's 18-month-old sale that happened at the peak of 2022, which was the peak of the absolute market we've ever seen. And we're valuing it as of January 1st of 2024. So we need to choose more recent sales than that. They can go back that far. You can try to go back that far as well. I mean, really, you can go back 2 years. That's kind of in the law. But it really comes down to what are the best sales that represent the value as of January 1st of 2024. There are some properties that are unique and really hard to value, and you have to go back 2 years. Like if we're talking about Highland Park, where we've got a $6 million property, it might be worth it to go back 2 years to find a sale that's comparable to it, because it's harder to find a comp for that. If we're talking about, we're up in Collin County and we're in some master plan community, it's going to be pretty hard to justify going back 2 years for a sale, because it's highly likely that there's more recent sales that are very comparable to yours than that. So, yeah, I hope that answers that question. It depends on really the property. Yes, technically you can go back 2 years. However, if there's a lot better sales that are more recent than that, that's probably going to be thrown out. And they're going to say, we need to focus on the more recent sales.
Gotcha. And then someone else is asking, and these are all great questions, guys. Will this 100,000 continue? She heard kind of through the grapevine that it might go away.
I think that's there. If anything, I think if they'll continue to go up on that. But I don't think that they're not going to take the exemption down from that. I think where confusion might be is a lot of people feel like that benefit was diminished to some extent because of the value increase that we just had this year in Dallas, which is true. If you got a $100,000 homestead exemption, but then your value just shot up, $125,000, that homestead exemption benefit is going to be, some of it's going to be wiped out because of that. And so just through inflation and property values, that $100,000 homestead exemption as a percentage of your total value, as values continue to climb, is going to be less and less. So,
can you can confirm online on the DCAD site that you have a homestead exemption in place, right?
Yeah, you have to scroll down a little bit where it starts talking about taxable values. So like you'll see at the very top where it talks about like ownership information, like your value, and then like your mailing address and owner name. You scroll down and it starts talking about the improvement of the property, like the square footage, the building quality rating. Then it talks about the land, square footage, things like that. And then it talks into taxable values. Under that section, you'll see homestead exemption. And then if you have an over 65 exemption, they're not allowed to display that publicly on websites anymore. But a lot of times it's classified as like other exemption. So if you see homestead and then other, that's usually a key that you do have your over 65 in place there still.
Don't forget to get that, folks. That is one of the only perks of getting old, right, Jim?
That's right. That's right. Somebody asked you a question, do you have to apply for it? And you shouldn't if you filed a homestead exemption pretty recently, because you have to give your driver's license and they capture your birthday off that driver's license. But it's good
when you
to
said
check
file,
and make sure.
you meant you have to file your over 65 exemption. Yeah.
Yeah. And someone else asked a question, do I have to apply for the cap, the homestead cap, or the circuit breaker? No, you don't. The district automatically calculates that.
Now you don't. So you don't qualify for any cap, the circuit breaker or the homestead cap, if you did not own that property on January 1st of 2023. So if you bought the property during 2023 or more recent, you're not going to have a circuit breaker cap or a homestead cap on that property. You'll have to wait a year in order to get that.
Okay. And someone else asked, and I think I know the answer, but I'll let you guys answer because you're the experts. What can we do for investment properties since the 10% cap doesn't apply? That's the 20%, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's the circuit breaker. What can you do? You protest every year. Glenn said this before, it's a long game. Sometimes the data is there to get a reduction, and sometimes it's not. And that's the reason that we promote people signing up with a consultant, because a consultant will file the protest on time every year. And if you try to do this yourself, there's a few people that can do it, but most people will file a protest. And I think the percentages are the people that file their own protest, 50% of them are no-shows. They have good intentions, but they don't follow through.
And someone said she purchased a home in January of 2024, received her notice of appraised value. It does not reflect a homestead. Can I still file my homestead exemption with my appeal? Can we?
Those are two separate issues. A lot of people do confuse the homestead exemption with the appeal, and some people think they actually can't file a protest if they have a homestead exemption in place. Those are two totally separate issues. File the protest, number one. If you just purchased in January of 2024 and your property sold through MLS, the appraisal districts do have access to MLS, so they will probably be aware of what you paid for the property. So if you paid less than what they have you on for, definitely file a protest, and definitely file your homestead exemption as soon as possible, like right now. Even though they publicized that April 30th deadline, we discussed earlier how you technically have 2 years past the delinquency date. So go ahead and file the homestead exemption right now and file the protest right now.
You just hit on something that I saw an earlier question, and I know I get this a lot from readers. What if you hide the sale of your home? You sell your home, you don't, release the sales price, you keep it quiet. How does the appraisal district find out what you paid for your home?
Why don't you take that?
Yeah.
Dad?
Well, we had a question in. You will get a letter from the appraisal district, and it will look pretty official, and it will say, we're charged with valuing every property in Dallas County or Collin County or wherever it is. We'd like to know what you paid for your property. Please fill out this form and mail it back to us. So it's not required that you do that. You don't have to do that. Texas is one of 6 states in the country that's a non-disclosure state. Your sales price is not on your deed. And if you bought it outside of MLS, there's really only a couple of people that know what you paid for the property, and you don't have to disclose that. So if it went through MLS, the district gets those sales, and there's probably not much you can do about that. But if you bought it, just private party, you don't have to disclose that information. You do not have to send that letter back in.
Now, sometimes they can back into it if you, on your deed, they'll have terms from your mortgage on there, and they can back into it that way. And there's also the old-fashioned, we know that there's a transaction on this property and we don't know what it's sold for, so let's just increase the heck out of it and have the homeowner come in and show us if we're wrong on that. So there's little games they can play to get that information, but they're not entitled to sales price information in Texas.
This is interesting. I entered a property address into your website. It is in a single family rental lot, but DCAD has it classified as commercial. So your system says you're unable to offer your service. So can you offer?
Yeah, so Property Tax IO we specialize in single family residential, and we look at the land codes on the property. And part of this is because what our website is doing is it's running an algorithm in the background that's analyzing if we can save you money or not. And we're actually producing what we think are indicated values based off of recent sales. And so we're restricted with the property types that we run the algorithm through, because it's geared, the goal of the algorithm is to value single family residential. So if the state land code is not classified as single family residential, it gets kicked out of the algorithm, because we won't be able to produce an accurate value for it. And that's so if you go on our website and you do have a single family residential, you'll see a nice analysis there that shows a map of recent sales that we're analyzing in the area, some stats from the neighborhood of recent sales, and then also you'll see these two values, a low indicated and a high indicated value that our algorithm is calculating for that property that's based off of the valuation models that the appraisal district use. So, and that's specific for each appraisal district. So that's why we're a little restrictive with that information, because we're trying to be accurate with what information we provide to people.
Good. Someone else wants to know, land value in my area went up 150,000. Can this be protested? I've heard also that don't even bother protesting land value. So I'll let you take that.
Land value in very rare cases can be lowered. Now, if you're in more of a lower density area where land has more unique issues, then yeah, it can be valued. But we're more talking about in like lower density areas. For a vast majority of the people that are going to be watching this, um, stay away from land value arguments. Focus on condition. Focus on comps, recent sales. Avoid price per square foot comparisons to your neighbor, because the appraisal districts will have a valuation that's very different than price per square foot, and they're going to throw that out and plug it into their system. So a lot of people try to argue land values down. Oh, what they're doing is they're increasing everybody's land value, and that's just a reflection of this area is more attractive, more valuable than it was last year. That's because market values have gone up, and we're going to increase land values to reflect that market values have gone up. So in very rare circumstances, can you lower a land value? Spend your couple of minutes making your case on recent sales and photos.
Someone else, I think a couple of people have asked about the circuit breaker cap. Do you have a visual on that? Maybe we'll have to create one. Because by the way, guys, all of this is going to be on CandysDirt.com. So keep on reading, just, check us daily. Circuit breaker cap.
It works just like the homestead cap with residential, which most people have gotten used to and understand, except that instead of a 10% bump with homesteads, the circuit breaker is a 20% bump. And it applies to rental property, it applies to vacant land, it applies to any kind of commercial property. So if you have a rent house and they valued it last year at 500,000, and this year they want to value it at 600,000, they're going to cap it at last year's value plus 20%, which would be 500,000, and 20% of that would be actually $100,000. So that wouldn't be a good example. Let's say they raised it to 700,000. They would have to cap it at 600,000, which is last year's value plus 20%.
When you say sign on, do you have to protest for us every year? Does this cost us anything? When you say
Our service we do, and this is common among all firms. The reason we have an ongoing representation, the reason for that is getting authorized on an account is an administrative nightmare with the appraisal districts with the volume that they have. So we make it an ongoing service. The way that we handle that is we have easy cancellation from our dashboard. So you can log in and you don't have to talk to anybody. You can just cancel the service and we'll remove it. You can chat in and cancel it. We also send, like 5 emails throughout the year that remind people that we're authorized and you can cancel. So if you hire a company, just make sure that they're keeping in constant communication with you and it's easy to cancel the service. Like we make it very easy to cancel the service because we understand that some people just want to hire us for a year and do it. We don't set it to automatically expire because if we did that, it would be an administrative nightmare every year for us to get reauthorized on the accounts that our clients that want us to protest. It can take weeks to get authorized and that jams up the systems and the appraisal districts hate that. And so it's just better for us to make it ongoing and then let you cancel. And we try to make it as easy as possible to cancel with our service. So if you're not using our company, make sure that there's an easy cancellation policy with that company as well.
Okay. And someone else, this is another question that is kind of interesting. I'm a little confused on the April 30th deadline. Used to be a homestead couldn't be added until they lived in the house January 1st. Now, as long as they confirm residence, driver's license, then it can be added. So it doesn't apply the savings until the next year. Does that make sense?
Do you have a take on that, Dan? I wasn't quite sure on what the question.
Yeah, it's someone who's familiar with the old rule. The old rule is you have to own and occupy property as of January the 1st to get your homestead exemption. So in an extreme example, if you owned it on January 1st, but you didn't move in until January the 3rd, you're not eligible for that homestead for the full year. That changed a couple of years ago, and now you get a prorated homestead. So you do get the homestead for, in this example, 362 out of 365 days of the year if you didn't move in until, say, January 2nd or 3rd. But there is another caveat to that kind of ties into that is when does your 10% cap rule take effect? And it doesn't take effect until you've had your homestead for a full calendar year. So that example I just mentioned where you get the homestead prorated on January the 3rd of say this year, then you're not eligible for a homestead cap in January of 2025. because you didn't live in a house for a full calendar year.
Very
Hey,
good.
Candy, I think we're getting word from Trustee Joe in the background to wrap up.
I know there's so many questions, but these are great questions. I'd love to answer every one of them. And if I can afterwards, I will. And we'll have the video and analysis on CandysDirt.com. So again, stay tuned, read us every day. Anything else you guys want to add before we wrap up?
Just be sure, I'm going to share it one more time for the people that are still, if you're hanging with us, great. Be sure and follow us on social media. We love to provide great content for everybody. It's geared towards real estate professionals. File a protest this year. Hire a company to do it if you don't think you have the fortitude to see it through. It can be a bit of a beatdown. A lot of people that file a protest end up not showing up for the hearing. So if you don't think that you're going to show up for the hearing, just hire a company. Don't hire a company after the deadline. Hire a company before the May 15th deadline if you're going to do it. If you're going to protest, don't use price per square foot comparison of my property next to me and this property next to me. Try to get more granular than that. Try to say I have these photos, or I don't have a pool, they do have a pool, that kind of thing. Get more line item specific. Don't be discouraged by large caps. Take a more long-term approach. If you're in Collin, Denton, or Tarrant County, now might be a good year to really actually see tax savings where you haven't been able to see it in the past.
Candy, one more quick plea to people out there. We have a lot of people still on. If you have any interest in serving on the ARB, that's not a volunteer position. They do actually pay. I think it's a pay rate of about $40 an hour. So you can pick up $300 a day for going down there and playing judge all day long. It's not that bad. And so if you're retired or have the time to do that, we really need better ARB members. And if you're on this seminar, you have an interest in property tax and probably know others that do. So you can just get in touch with DCAT, and it's not hard to get on the board.
We should have people on there who own homes too, but
That's right. That's right.
This has been amazing. I could go on and on, but I know that people have other things to do. But and thank you all so much for watching. But I really want to thank Republic Title, the North Texas market leader in title insurance and escrow services, with 12 locations in the DFW area. Republic Title brings a wealth of knowledge and experience that delivers top-notch service to each and every closing. And we sure wish we could put them in, I'm sure, to handle our property tax protests. They can't do that, but they are an industry authority on the local real estate market. So think about that. They're an authority on the local real estate market because they're doing all these closings. So they're an excellent partner to help you get your deals closed accurately and smoothly. So I want to give a big thank you to Republic Title for their support, for understanding how important this issue is to everyone out there. And be sure to connect with them for their expert guidance on your next real estate transaction. I mean, these are great people who really care about all of us in the real estate industry and want to help us do the best we can do for our clients and for ourselves.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Go to my website, propertytax.io. We use our live chat. If you have any questions, we'd love to help you with your property tax protest this year.
And to be continued. We will not stop talking about property taxes on CandysDirt.com. I can guarantee you that.
Bye, everybody.